Same, that number is there. SAR name. Anywhere you should not include your name, SAR number. This is something.
Yes, very good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, I request the third batch to continue with the number representation. Yes, the session is open to third batch. You can continue your presentation beneath the number representation.
Yes, sir.
So what about me?
For that, yes, I request Kritika to continue with the earlier content,
Okay.
yesterday's content. That is yesterday's content. Yes, go ahead, Kritika.
Bhargav, can you share the slide?
Yeah.
Bhargav, go ahead, Bhargav.
It's loading.
Bhargav, what happened?
Sir, it's loading, sir.
Still it is going.
Due
Okay,
to
at the end
internet
you can continue with your presentation. A third batch
It came,
is
sir, it came. Now it is visible, sir.
yes, now it is visible. Go to the respective page which she is going to continue.
Don't know when milestone.
You can continue.
So, hi. Good afternoon, guys. So, yeah, as Gokul told yesterday about the other two transfer modes, we are now gonna see about the third and the last transfer mode, that is the direct memory access method. So first, I'll tell you about where does this DMA plays in.
Yes, steam your screen, steam your camera, and go.
So, okay. Yeah, so first I'll tell you about where this DMA is playing a role and where does it comes into action. So Bhaga, can you go to the next slide? So consider so generally in a computer or any system we'll have a CPU, input output device, and a memory. So generally if you have to execute any program, the input output device will transfer the data to CPU and then from CPU to memory, again memory to input output device. So generally this is a very big cycle, like it involves around 2 to 3 cycles. So this is very time consuming and all that, like it's the CPU is like kind of overburdened, right? So what if I say here the in between the memory and input device, we can directly transfer data using DMA. So that's where this DMA comes into action. Like it helps the transfer of data between the memory and input output device without the involvement of CPU. So basically it's like it will reduce the number of cycle and it's also very it's not time consuming, and so therefore it will make the system very efficient. So now we'll see about the definition. So can you go to the before slide? Before. 49. Yeah, see here. So direct memory access is a method that allows an input-output device to send or receive data directly to or from the main memory bypassing the CPU. So without the involvement of CPU, we are transferring the data using the input-output device and the memory. So this process is done by using a chip which is known as the DMA controller. This only controls the process, the entire process. So this so it basically is used to communicate data between the peripheral device and the system memory. So now we see about the working of the DMA. So next slide. Next one, 51. Yeah, so now I'll explain the block diagram. So here we have CPU and then there is DMA controller and there is this controller and the main memory. So here, in DMA controller we have block address, word count and control. I'll explain all this. So generally what happens is, first CPU will make sure that DMA controller is free and it's able to transfer all the data and all that. So it will first make sure, it will set the register for DMA that everything is okay. It will make sure the DMA is ready to do the transfer. So next what it does is the CPU will ask the disk controller to transfer the data from the drive and store it in its internal buffer. So unless the data is stored, this DMA cannot transfer the data, right? So first it will make sure the data is transferred into the buffer, into its internal buffer, and then so that the DMA controller can begin the process, transfer of data process. So first this DMA controller will send a request to the disk controller begin the process, to begin the transfer of data. It will send a request to the disk controller, and then this disk controller will begin the process of transfer of data, and it will send the data to the main memory. So this is first step. The DMA will request and the data will be transferred. So after the process is done, this disk controller will send an acknowledgement that it has completed the transfer, and it will send an acknowledgement to this DMA controller. So once the DMA controller receives the acknowledgement, the word count will be checked by this DMA controller. The word count is nothing but the byte count. Like after each transfer, the word count will get decreased. So sometimes it can be 1 or less than 1 or even 0. So the byte count will be checked by this DMA controller. So if this byte controller is not a 0, the process will again happen. Like it will again request, again the data transfer will happen, and again acknowledgement will be sent. So until the word count comes to 0, the process will keep on continuing. Okay. So next slide. Yeah, so basically this is the entire operation of DMA controller. See, first the CPU will set the register of DMA controller, and it will also ask the disk controller to transfer the data from its internal from its drive and store it in the internal buffer. And then after every data is stored, the process will begin. That is, the DMA will send a request, the data will be transferred, and again the word count will be checked. And then without the at last what will happen is this DMA controller, after completing the entire process, that is when the byte count comes to 0, this DMA controller will interrupt the CPU, and it will say that the process is done, the transfer is done. So this is what the DMA is. So it is very time efficient and it's not overburdening the CPU also. Okay, so next one. Next slide. Okay, so this is input-output processor. So input-output processor is basically a processor that can carry out all the input-output tasks, and this is also capable of direct memory access. This is more or less same like DMA, but then it is a processor, with the DMA capability. And so yeah, this also will help to prevent the overburdening of CPU, as it would perform activities without the involvement of CPU. So here also I'll explain this block diagram, then we'll come to the use so you can understand it very clearly. So we have the central processing unit here, memory here, and this is the input-output processor, which is connected to a lot of peripheral devices, that is some device with input-output interference. Okay, so everything is connected to the memory bus. So what will happen here is, so next slide. So in this case, the CPU will act as a master and IOP will act as a slave. Like whatever task is assigned to the IOP is done by the CPU. CPU will assign tasks to the IOP. IOP will perform all those tasks. So this is only will happen. So at first, what will happen is the CPU will first, in order to begin the transfer of data, it should know about the status of the IOP, right? So first, it will send an instruction to know about the IOP status. Sometimes it can be busy with different any other transfer, or it can be free. Sometimes it can be overburdened and everything. So based on it, it will send an instruction, and this IOP will transfer the status to the CPU. So if the status is okay and if everything is okay, task instruction will be sent. Like whatever the task it should be assigned will be sent to the IOP. Now if the IOP is free, it will start to work on it. It will access the info and it will start to work on it. Meanwhile, what happens in the CPU is that it will begin to continue with the execution of the other programs, like whatever the other task the user is assigning to the CPU, it will start to progress with it. And this IOP, what will does is it will the same process as like DMA will continue, like the IO transfer using DMA will happen. And after everything is done, it will send an acknowledgement to the memory. See, after everything is done, and it will again interrupt the CPU, like saying that the IO transfer is done and all that. So after this CPU will request the IOP status, like if it is again free and all that, or if the transfer is completed, like that. So this IOP will it will transfer the status again, and if everything is done, the CPU again will work on the other execution. So this is what happens. This is also same like DMA, but then this is a processor which has the DMA capability. So this is what IOP. And now we'll see the use of IOP. Can you go to the before slide? Before. So this is the IOP. So what will happen if there is no IOP and only there is CPU? So in this case, CPU will be asked to perform all the actions and activities which will be assigned to it. So basically, it will reduce the overall computer performance and it will also be very time consuming. The system, so if there is an IOP, this computer will be more efficient and the performance will be increased because the CPU will be is free to carry out the remaining tasks as the IOP will perform its own task. So this is what happens in input-output processor, and then we'll go to the bus arbitration. Next slide.
Yes, Bhargav, you move the slides one by one, Bhargav. Is IOP process, and then 55. Go to next slide.
Okay, so now we are seeing about the bus.
Yes, next slide.
Okay, so bus arbitration.
You stay.
Before 55.
Then and then 57. 57. Okay. Thank you, Kritika. Thank you for your presentation. You did well. Fine. Due to time constraint, we were unable to get the information for 54th and 55th and 56th slide. Anyway, it is fine. Thank you. Third batch.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead with your content.
Yes, sir.
Manage accordingly till 120. You have to converge 2 to 3 minutes. You can take 3 minutes each. Converge the content. Yes.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, guys. Today we will talk about the number representation. So my name is Jayant. So I will talk about the number systems and the types of number system and explain them in brief. Okay, next, let's go. Number system. Let's go next slide. Yeah, what is a number system? A number system is a system representing the numbers. It is a definite set of values to represent a quantity. The common digits are 0 to 1, and the digits from 0 to 9 are represented as decimals or binary 0 to 9 binaries and the octadecimals type of systems. Let's go. What are the type of number systems? The types of number system: decimal system, octal system, hexadecimal system, and binary system. Okay, next. So what is a decimal system? So the decimal system has a base of 10. It consists of the numbering of the decimal systems are very easy. So if you check out an example of 243, the 3 is in ones place, and the 4 is in tens place, and the 2 is in hundreds place. So it is of 10 to the 3 is in 10 to the power of 0 position, and the 4 is in 10 to the power of 1 position, and the 2 is in 10 square position. So the decimal positions are the base of 10. Yeah. Let's go. Octal system. So the octal system has the base of 8, and it consists of 8 digits 0 to 7. Each position is 8 times the previous position. So let's take an example of 437. The 7 is in ones place, and 3 is in eights place, and 4 is in 64th place. So the next position, the next number will be the 8 times the position of the back number. So yeah, that's right. That's it about the octal number system. Let's go to the hexadecimals. It consists of 16 numbers. It consists of 0 to 9, but after that it will has of A, B, C, D, E, F. The A, B, C, D means 10 to 16. The base is 16, and each position is 16 times the previous position. So check it out. Here is a note. The A represents the 10, B represents the 11, and so on. So let's take the position of the hexadecimals. E4C. The C is in ones place, 4 is in 16th place, E is in 256th place. So the back position is 16 times the front position. Yeah. Let's go to the binary system. The binary system has only 2 digits, 0 to 1. The base is 2. The each position is double the previous position. So if you take up the example, 2 to the power of 1 is in 2 to the power of zeros place 2 to the power of 1. Yeah, that's it. It goes the double the positions. So why the binary system is used? The binary system is used mainly for the computer. The computer always converts the alphabets and numbers, decimals into the binary system, so that it can it will read it. The computer will always convert every alphabet and decimal into the binary position, binary numbers. The binary numbers are very important. This simplifies the design of computers and related technologies. You can use the binary code for encrypted messages for your friends. Yeah. The conversion part will be taken by my friend Dhanush. Thank you, guys.
Hi friends, today we will discussing about conversion. Next slide. In bro, Nishant. In conversion, we'll discussing about
Hey.
binary to decimal, and decimal to binary, and decimal to hexadecimal, and decimal to octadecimal. Next slide. First of all,
Dhanush
we'll
Vardhan, right?
Sir.
Dhanush Vardhan. Okay, go ahead. Yes, earlier presented the content presented by Jayant.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Now we will convert binary to decimal conversion. For example, take binary number 01011101. Now we have to write position values from right side of that binary number. For units place we want to write 2 power 0, and tens place 2 power 1, and hundreds place 2 power 2, and thousands place 2 power 3, and so on. So the position values for position values is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64. Now we will get the now you have to multiply position values with respect to binary number. So the result will be 0 plus 0, 32, 0, 8, 4, 0, 1. We have to add the result to get the decimal number. So 0 plus 32 plus 0 plus 8 plus 4 plus 0 plus 1 equals to 45. 45 is the new decimal number. Next slide. Here is the another example. To convert binary number 10011 to decimal. Write out the bits and their weights. Here weights equals to position values. So multiply the bits by its corresponding weights and record the result. At the end, add the result to get the decimal number. So binary number equals to 10011. For 1, we get the position value is 1. For 1, the position value is 2, and so on. So the result will be 16 plus 0 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1. So therefore the decimal number is 19. Next. Now we will convert decimal to binary. How do you convert the following decimal to binary? Take example 25. Next. With the ladder technique, we will convert decimal to binary in easy way. Next. We have the steps to follow. Step 1. Divide the number by 2 and store the remainder. The remainder is the first digit of your new binary number. So we have taken 25 as a example. So 25 divided by 2, the coefficient is 0 and the remainder is 1. Here 1 is the new first digit of your new binary number. Next. Step 2. Divide the coefficient from previous division by 2. Store the remainder. This remainder is the second digit of your new binary number. We got the remainder coefficient 12 from previous division. So 12 divided by 2, the coefficient is 6 and the remainder is 0. Next. Repeat this process until the coefficient is equal to 0. So we have to repeat the this process only until the coefficient becomes 0. Next. Answer reads down. Here the coefficient is becomes 0. So here here the reminders are 11001. Therefore, the decimal 25 is equals to 11001 in binary. Next. This technique works when you want to convert from decimal to any other bases. You simply divide by base you are converting to. For example, convert decimal 25 to hexadecimal. Here hexadecimal means 16. Base is 16. So 25 by 16. The quotient is 1 and remainder is 9. And 1 divided by 16, the quotient is 0 and remainder is 1. So we have to read answer down. So decimal 25 equals to 19 in hexadecimal. It can be written as 25 base 10 equals to 19 base 16. Next. Now we will convert 2980 to octadecimal. So octadecimal means base is 8. So 2980 divided by 8, the quotient is 372 and the remainder is 4. For 372, the remainder is 4 and the quotient is 46. For 46, the quotient is 5 and remainder is 6. For 5, the quotient is 0 and remainder is 5. Therefore, the decimal 2980 equals to 5644 in octal. It can be written as 2980 base 10 equals to 5644 in base 8. Now, my friend Dinesh will continue.
Yeah, hello. Now we are going to see how to add 181 in the decimal. So when you add that, it's 266, it's a normal addition. But when you convert 85 to decimal, you get 1010101. So when you convert 181 to binary, you get 1010101. So to match the numbers, you add extra 0 to the binary representation of 85. So when you add 1 plus 1, it gives 2, but maximum you can have 1 only in the binary. So binary representation of 2 is 0, 1, 0. So you add 0 here and carry over the 1. Same way 1 plus 0 gives 1. And again 1 plus 1 gives 2. So binary representation of 2 is 0 and then 1.
Dinesh, you can use your mouse to detail the calculations. And you can take even the pen and lasers.
Sir, but the presentation is given by Nishant, sir.
You can also, yes.
Yes. Desk you are seeing. Yes, sir. When you add here, when you add 1 plus 1, it gives 2, but 2 maximum you can have 1 only in the binary. So converting decimal 2 to binary, you get 1 0. So you add 0 here and then carry over 1. So when you add 1 plus 0, you get direct 1. Again, when it comes to add 1 and 1, you get 2. Same way it's 1 0. So 0 here and 1 here. So continuing this process, you get this as your answer. When you convert 266 from decimal to binary, you get the same answer. You don't get different answers comparing to different number system. So same when you convert decimal to 662 binary, you get the same answer. Next. Now we are going to the next topic, integer representation. Next. Integer is a whole number without fraction. It can be positive or negative. Integer is a whole number without fraction, decimal, and other things. Next. Integer ranges from negative infinity to positive infinity. The numbers without fraction and decimals. Next. Integer representation is classified to unsigned and signed. First, let's see about unsigned. Unsigned number is an integer. It is also an integer, but it doesn't have signs, where integer have negative sign and positive sign, but unsigned integer don't have signs. It just ranges from 0 to plus infinity. You use unsigned integer mostly in computers only. So always computer have a constant defined that is called maximum unsigned integer. That maximum unsigned integer means the maximum amount of number a computer memory location can store. An unsigned integer ranges between 0 and the maximum unsigned integer. Then maximum unsigned integer depends on the number of bits allocated to represent the unsigned integer. Yes, when you have the formula for maximum unsigned integer is 2 power n minus 1. So you have a memory location already defined a term called bit. So where n is the bit, when you have 8 bit, you have 2 power 8 minus 1 as the maximum unsigned integer. So the range is from 0 to 2 power n minus 1. Next. Yeah, for example, when you take 8, you start from 0 to 2 power 8 minus 1, where 2 power 8 is 256 and minus 1 gives 255. Same way for 16, you have 0 to 65535. Next. Yeah, now we are going to see how unsigned integer is stored in a computer. It doesn't store as such the decimal number you input. It first changes the integer you enter to binary form. Then number of bits is less than n. Zeros are added to the left to the binary so that there is a total of n bit. If let's say an example of you have a 8-bit computer, you need not enter 8-bit input. You can enter less than 8. It can handle that. To match the computer's memory location, the computer automatically adds zeros to the left to make it to the 8 bits or some bit of the computer. Next. Yeah, when you take an example of storing 7 in 8-bit memory location, first you have to convert 7 to binary. Same way as mentioned by Dhanush, you are converting 7 to binary. You get 7 decimal to 111 in the binary, but 111 is just 3-bit representation, but you are going to store it in 8-bit memory location. So you add 5 zeros to match the 8-bit memory location. To the left side, you are going to add zeros to the left to make it as a look like 8-bit memory location. So you get 8-bit answer, that is 5 zeros followed by 3 ones. Next. Yeah, now we are going to see 258 stored in 16-bit memory location. When you convert 258 to binary, you get this answer as explained by the method before. You get this answer, but this has only 9 digits. To match with 16, you are going to add 7 zeros to left side of the binary to get as a 16-bit representation. Next. Yeah, now comes where you are going to store a number which is greater than the bit memory size. So when you take 8-bit memory location, it has maximum of 255 as mentioned before. So when what will happen when you try to store more than that? When you convert 256 to binary, you get 9-bit memory location where you can't store 9-bit in 8-bit. So as the 9 is greater than 8, it defines a term called overflow. That means the input is more than the bit that can be stored in the memory location. Next. Yeah, when you take an example of 7, it gets only 3-bit binary representation, so it can be stored in 18 and 16-bit allocation. And when you comes to 234, 255 is the maximum, so it can be stored in both 8 and 16-bit location. When it comes to 258, 255 is the maximum, so In 8-bit location, it overflows, but in 16-bit, it's 65,000 is the maximum, so it can store that there. Same for 24,000, 8-bit overflows, and 16-bit can store. But when you come to 12 lakh something, 65,000 is the maximum in 16-bit also. So both 8-bit and 16-bit overflows. Next. Yeah, how do you interpret an unsigned binary representation in decimal? Now you have shown converting decimal to binary representation in unsigned. Now we are going to do the opposite way. Next. When you take an example of 00101 011, this is 8-bit memory example of 8-bit memory location. So you have 8 digits. As we added zeros in the left side of the binary number to match the 8-bit location, we are going to remove that here, and you get the number 101011. So this method was stated before. Same way you are writing the position value, then multiplying with the binary values, you get some result and add them up to get the decimal representation of the given binary number. So for the stored number, your decimal representation is 43. Next. Yeah, the unsigned application of unsigned integers. Mostly you use it for counting, as you don't require negative numbers or fraction parts. For counting, you usually start from 0, 1, 2, 3 and go up. So you need not require minus. So you use unsigned integer for counting. Same way for addressing. When there is a necessary for storing a memory location in another memory location, that is in computer, storing a memory location inside another memory location.
Just about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Please wait.
Yes.
Okay, otherwise I'm not using you.
Yes, you continue.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you use this unsigned again computer where you require storing a memory location to another memory location. Usually in computer, memory location is a positive numbers. So you use unsigned integers for storing the one memory location to other memory location. These are the applications of unsigned integers. And next part of integer representation will be continued by Ranga. Thank you.
Hello guys, this is Ranga. Just before my friend explained about unsigned integers, I am here to explain you about signed integers. Mainly in signed integers, we have three kinds: sign and magnitude, 1's complement and 2's complement. I am here to explain about sign and magnitude representation. Next. Yeah, sign and magnitude representation. Here, what is sign integer? Sign integer means the integer with any sign, means either positive or negative. Here we have, while storing the signed integer, first we have to divide it two parts, which is the signed part, which is plus or minus. Here, while storing this plus or minus in binary numbers, we have to make them convert them into, if plus is there, we have to take it as 0, and if minus, we have to take it as negative. And the range of this sign and magnitude integers are minus of 2 power n minus 1 to plus of 2 power n minus 1 minus 1. Yeah. Here n means number of bits. In the above formula, if you replace n with 8, means in 8-bit we get the numbers from minus 127 to plus 127. Similarly, in 16-bit we get 32,767 minus 2 plus 32,767. Similarly, in 32 bits. Next. Yeah. Here in sign and magnitude representation, we have two kinds of zeros. Means 1 0 we represent it with positive sign, and other zeros are which are used in binary number for the integer. Here you see in 8 bit we have plus 0. Here first 0 is represented as sign bit, which is positive sign, and other zeros are represented for 0. Similarly, in minus 0, minus means 1. So we wrote 1 here, and the minus 0 represents the remaining. Next. Yeah. Sign and magnitude representation. Next. If you consider the signed integer, first you have to divide it into two, means signed part, which is either positive or negative. Which means if positive is there, we have to take it as 0, and if negative means we have to take it as 1. Next, the remaining integer part, we have to convert it into binary number. Next, if we take some nth bit number, which means we have to fill the gaps of n minus 1 bits with number integers binary number. When we have some bits less than n minus 1, we have to add zeros to the left of the binary number of the integer. How many zeros means we have to add zeros up to the number becomes n minus 1 bits. Then to the left of that we have to add the sign bit, which is either 0 or 1 according to the sign. Next. Yeah. Store +7 in 8-bit memory location using sign and magnitude representation. Here we have integer as 7 and sign as positive. Means if you convert the integer into binary number, we get 111. But here we get only 3 bits. But we have to, excluding the sign bit, we have to fill the binary with 7 bits with the number, integer binary. But we have only 3 bits, which means we have to fill the remaining 4 bits with zeros to the left of this integers binary. And we have to add, here we have positive sign, so we have to add 0 to the left of this binary number. Next. Yeah. Store -258 in 16-bit memory using sign and magnitude representation. Same like before, first we have to convert the integer into binary, which means we get here 9 bits. Excluding the sign bit, we have to consider 15 bits with the integers binary, but we have only 9 bits, so we have to add 6 zeros to the left of this binary, and to left of this whole we have to add the sign bit, which is negative, means we have to add 1. Next. Example of storing sign and magnitude integers into two computers, means each one in one computer we have 8-bit allocation, and in another we have 16 bits. First example, +7 means for 7 we have 111, and we have to store it in 8-bit, means we have to add zeros, and for positive sign we can make this in 16-bit also by adding extra zeros. Similarly here 124, which have 8 bits, -124 which have 8 bits, and we can also store it in 16 bits. But when we consider +258, we have 9 bits, which means we can't store it in 8 bit, so it will be overflowed. So we can store it in 16 bit. Similarly for -24,760. Next. Interpretation. Next, how to interpret a single signed binary representation into decimal. Means up to now we changed the decimal into signed binary. Now we have to reverse it. Next. Yeah. First we have to ignore the leftmost bit, which is sign bit, because by considering that we have to tell the sign of this number. Okay. Next, excluding that, we have to take the remaining n minus 1 bits, and we have to convert them into integer, and we have to attach the sign. Next. Yeah, interpret 10 111 112 decimal number if the number was stored in sign and magnitude form. As we know, in sign and magnitude form, the leftmost bit was sign bit, which means which represents the sign of the integer. Here we have 1, means it was negative sign. Excluding that one, the remaining bits represent the number 59. So we have to add negative sign to that, and the number is minus 59. Yeah. Sign and integer applications. Here we have advantages and some disadvantages also. Let us see about advantages. Transformation means we have in this application we can transform the decimal into binary and vice versa so easily, which is also used, for example, while converting audio, means analog signals to digital signals. Next. Yeah, here are disadvantages. This sign and magnitude representation is not used now in computers because the operations like subtraction and addition are not straightforward, and it also uncomfortable for programming because here we have two kind of zeros but we represent them similarly, so you can't differ them. So it is also uncomfortable for programming. Now my friend Nishant will continue.
Good afternoon, guys. I'll be saying about the ones complement part, and in the ones complement part, we will be seeing about why we need to learn ones complement and how to do various arithmetic operations with that, and how shall we take a ones complement of a binary number. Okay, first, why do we need to care about ones complement? The ones complement is mainly used to represent a signed binary number. It is also used to perform arithmetic operations such as addition and subtraction. In signed binary numbers, as we saw before, we can represent both positive and negative numbers. Like for representing positive numbers, there was nothing to do, and for representing a negative number, we must first represent the positive number with its binary, and we have to find the ones complement of it. Let's see how can we find the ones complement of a number. Okay, the ones complement can be obtained by changing all ones to zeros and all zeros to ones. Like you can see a binary number which reads 00010011, and we can also see the ones complement where all the zeros are converted into ones and where all the ones are converted into zeros. Okay, now let us see how can we represent a negative number. Okay, example, let's take the example as plus 6 and minus 6. Plus 6 will be represented at the same 110, and we can take 5-bit register for both the numbers for our convenience. Therefore, the number plus 6 in the 5-bit register reads as 00110, and where the first 0 represents the sign bit, then minus 6 is represented by taking the ones complement of the binary representation of plus 6, which comes as 11001, and the first bit is sign bit, and there is one which reads negative. Here MSB denotes the most significant bit and LSB denotes the least significant bit. Okay, let's see about ones complement subtraction. Like ones subtraction of the binary numbers in ones complement method allows it only by addition, because let's take two binary numbers as A and B. There is a negative sign before B. When to represent a number with the negative sign, you will first convert the binary number. You will first take the binary number of the positive sign and take complement, which also gives a negative sign. Therefore, as there are two negative signs, the subtraction becomes addition, and subtraction of number from another can be accomplished by adding the complement of the subtrahend. Here in this case, it's one's complement to the maniant. Okay, let's see about subtraction of a smaller number from a larger number. Okay, the steps are, first we are going to determine the ones complement of the smaller number, as we are subtracting the smaller number from the larger number, and we are going to add this to the larger number, and when we are adding, there will be carry as explained by Dinesh, and we will be adding the carry to the result. and it will be called as the end around carry as we are adding to the result. Okay, let's see an example of subtracting 1010 from 1111 using ones complement. First, we are going to find out the ones complement of 1010 and it will be as 0101, and in step 2 we are going to add this to 1111, and you can see the addition, and it when we are adding 1 and 1 it gives 2, and we will be representing 2 as 1 and 0, so we are putting 0 here and 1 will be moved on as a carry, and this process continues, and finally there will be a carry at last, and we are going to add the carry to the final answer, and the final answer is 0101. Okay, now let's see how can we subtract larger number from a smaller number. Okay, the steps are like the same as previous, but with a small change. First, we are going to determine the ones complement of the larger number, as we are subtracting the larger number from the smaller number, and we are going to add this to the smaller number, and the answer will be the ones complement of the obtained result, and it will be in the opposite sign, and there will be carry in the case. Okay, let's subtract 1010 from 1000 using ones complement method. First, we are going to find the ones complement of 1010, which is 0101, and we are going to add this with the smaller number 1000, and we are going to take ones complement of the final result to get the answer. Okay, and the addition is as follows, like we are adding this and getting 1101, and its one's complement comes as 0010, and we are putting a minus sign because we are subtracting a larger number from the smaller number. And from now, our friend Nabil will take our about 2's complement.
Hello guys.
Yes, go ahead, Nabil. Yes, you are unable to get any audio or any movement in your video. Nabil, what happened? Nabil? Yes, who took lead in third batch? Either Jayant or Jayant? Post a message to Nabil and inquire about what was happening. Nabil?
Sir, there is network issue with him, sir. I will call him now, sir.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, we'll wait Nabil to join. Nishant? Nishant, any information from Nabil? Nishant or Jayant?
Sir, it's like network issue for him, sir, and it's showing like leaving for him. So
Leaving.
he's
Okay.
trying now with mobile data, sir.
Okay, no issues. Ask him to present in the subsequent class. Already the time is 1:23, and we'll wind up here. Thank you for your presentation. It was very fine.
Yes, sir.
I
Thank
think
you,
the
sir.
average mark of this batch is more than the earlier batch, might be, and fine, good. Let tomorrow is Diwali. Let this Diwali be the happy and safe Diwali to everyone. Hope celebrate with very careful, and safety is very important than the celebration. So this Diwali might bring the happiness to you and all to your family. Thank you guys, and we'll meet during Monday, 10:30.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Happy
you.
Diwali, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Happy
Thank you,
Diwali.
sir. Happy